I'm very pleased to be featured in this film. I believe it's the first one of its kind that's been produced. And I'd like to take this opportunity of wishing the producers and the sponsors of it the best of luck.
I think it is a very good idea.
I think they're a clever lot of lads that started this. They've got me and you working for now.
Don't you recognize who I am? You've got to give me a big salam. Got to end with a vote of thanks to the Emperor of Lang. Bow down, everyone, here I come. Bang that timbrel. Bow down, everyone. Yes, sir, I'm the Emperor of Lancashire.
Who's this gentleman flashing down? Is he somebody we should know?
Is he somebody? Whoa, sir, I'm the Emperor of Lancashire.
Who's this gentleman talking loud? Is he one of the usual crowd?
Who's this gentleman, the hearted?
I'm the Emperor of Lancashire.
Don't you recognize who you've seen?
He's the boss of the whole shebeen. He's the fellow who broke the banks.
That's me, I'm the Emperor of Lancs. Who's that fellow there, crowdy row?
Who's that sucker the boys have found?
Who's that sucker, my dear sir? I'm the Emperor of Lancashire.
In the little Wigan garden, when the sun is falling down. Oh, what a place, what a case, a disgrace to my hometown.
George Formby was born George Hoy Booth in Wigan in 1904. The house at number 6 Westminster Street was modest, but by this time his father was well on the way to becoming a major music hall star under his stage name of George Formby.
He treated me and told me that the country wanted men. In lifeguard's clothes he said I'd look a treat. He gave to me a shilling and I signed my name, and then I was standing at the corner of the street.
I only had to see his father and I was in stitches. And the audience were too. He was very, very funny. He suffered with tuberculosis very badly, and he used to come on the stage himself, coughing better tonight.
Bronchitis. I'm a bit tight tonight on chest.
His success meant that he was able to provide a prosperous lifestyle for his family, as his daughter Ella remembers.
Well, he was a very thrifty man, and he saved his money, and he invested in things. He had a movie theatre, he had cottages, he had all kinds of property, he had big apartment buildings, and so we always had money. We never knew anything else.
Life was immensely comfortable in the Formby household.
We had a grand piano in there, we had a record player in there, we had a fireplace, we had a polar bear rug on the floor, we had a Victorian type of furniture, and then the other room was the library. Now my father was an uneducated man, so he bought every book on everything and he self-educated himself.
George was the eldest son, but he's always missing from family photographs, because his father, being passionately keen on horses, had sent him away to Ireland at the age of 7 to train as a jockey.
I really think that he resented it. I think it was rough for him there. I think he missed home. He ran away several times. I thought it was terrible myself, but I don't think my father intended or meant to be cruel in any way. It was just this ambition he had for his son to be a jockey and ride on his racehorses.
I'm a strong man, I can tell the way I'm built.
George Formby Sr. died at the age of 45 after a long fight against TB.
My dad collapsed and died in pantomime at Newcastle. Well, that was very awkward and a very sad blow, because actually he was going to retire, start a training stable, and I was going to train horses. But fate stepped in and it wasn't to be. So they said to me, well, what are you going to do now? I said, well, I'm not going back to the racing business, I'm too heavy. They said, why don't you go on the stage? I said, what the hell could I do on the stage? They said, well, you don't know till you try.
George's brother, Ted, remembers that it was their mother who pushed George onto the stage.
His mother wanted to carry the name on. She was very concerned. I think at the time my father had built this name up, and he had such a wonderful name. Everybody loved him, and I think that having lost him, and she was very much in love with him, that she felt she had to have something there, but her life was a void. She was only about a full woman of 40.
George Sr.'s stage act had been based on a Lancashire innocent called John Willie, a slow-thinking, hen-pecked, beer-loving figure who somehow muddled through.
Have a look at me. Did you hear him cry? It's little Willie, and he's looking quite all right. Did you
The problem was that George had never been taken to see his father on stage.
And my mother looked at George and she said, "Do you think you could do that?" And he said, "Well, any fool could do that, you know, being smug at 17. And so they went home. She put makeup on him, played his records, taught him. She had tutors. She paid a lot of money out to promote George. She went to the managers at the theatres where George, my father, was booked for years. And she said, "Would you give him a chance?" Well, they wouldn't all, but some of them loved my father so much that they said, "Well, all right, I'll give him a chance. He can go on second."
Anyway, I learned 2 songs off the records, 2 of my dad's songs, and a friend of his called Fred Harrison, he gave me a week's work at the place called the Hippodrome Earlstown. It's a little tin hut near Newtonley-Willers. And Newtonley-Willers is near Wigan, by the way. Wigan's in Lancashire. Well, anyway.
So he'd go on and he was pretty rotten, you know, and you can imagine, he was 17, 18, he was just a boy.
His first ever stage appearance was witnessed by Albert Longmore.
When it was his turn to come on, his act, he come on, he looked round. He says, "There's not many here, you know." So we all started laughing, you know. So anyway, he says, "I'm a jockey." And he started going up and down as though he got a whip in his hand, you know what I mean, and jogging as though he's riding a horse. And one of the boys that was with us, not me, he says, "Oh, you're rubbish." You know, he says, "Who said that?" You know.
At that time he appeared under his mother's maiden name of Hoy. Not surprisingly, he sounded remarkably like his father.
John Willie, come on, it's closing time, you see. The lights went out and all was dark and quiet as can be.
His mother, eager to see him succeed, spared no expense in promoting his career.
My wife had gone, and I'm sure I heard Queen Elizabeth say, "John Willie, come on."
When my father died, it was reported to have said that he left anywhere between £20,000 and £40,000, which of course in those days, 1921, was an awful lot of money. But really, the money did disappear. I suppose helping to put George on to start with. He was pampered to such an extent that if he wanted anything, Mother would give it to him. And I can always remember once that he did want a car, and in those days it was a very expensive car. He was an Elvis. He would say, "Go on, Mother, buy me that car. I'll work ever so hard," and he got the car.
Oh, Mother, what'll I do now?
But George Formby is best known for his ukulele playing. He first became interested when the American performer Ukulele Ike encouraged him to take it up.
He said, "You could do it, George." So he showed him, and they gave him the uke, and he tried it, and he thought this was nice. So all that week he came into the room and he practiced. So then he went out and bought a ukulele himself, and he practiced around the home. So then he gradually dropped my father's makeup, dropped his material, and started out on his own.
In 1923, Formby shared the bill with an attractive young dancer from Accrington, Beryl Ingham. Before long, George and Beryl were falling in love.
Don't you think love is a very wonderful thing?
Yeah, I don't know, I'm sure.
Do you love in the blaze of the sun or in the cool of the evening?
Well, usually on the heat of the moment.
Oh, you wonderful man. You thrill me. Oh, you master of destiny.
Oh, don't lure me.
Oh, you chic, you Adonis.
Mother, I'm skidding.
Oh, you gorgeous beast.
Mother, I've lost the battle.
He was 19 and she was 25, and she was like a mother to him even then. It was wrong. He sort of drifted away from the family then.
Hey, Lydia, you look proper champion. I'd like to tell the whole world we're going to get married.
How about telling your mother first?
Oh, Mother.
As regards George and mother, I mean, my mother was a very possessive woman. I suppose this comes about by losing her husband so early, so she had to have something to hold on to.
What, Miss Gibbs? Did you? George and Lydia last night at the pictures? Oh, no, nothing like that. My George always says if there's any girl he's sweet on, it's me.
So when Georgie came home and said he'd met Beryl Ingham and he wanted to get married, she said, you're only 19, you don't know what you're talking about. And he said, well, I want to get married, I love her.
Married?
Well, Mother, I was going to tell you, see, at the factory I've got to raise him wages enough to get married on.
Oh, my heart.
Mother, you're all right now.
Oh, I can't help it, it's my heart.
So she said, well, I'm not going to sign the paper. And you can't get married until you're at least 21. So he went, I guess he went back to Beryl, and they talked about it. And so they came over again, and he said, well, she's pregnant. So, of course, that changed things. My grandmother said to my mother, now, Liza, you know, you've got girls, and you wouldn't like that to happen to them, so you've got to sign that paper. So she signed the paper. Of course, she wasn't pregnant. She never had been pregnant, and never was.
I'll make him a good wife, Mrs. Pearson, and we'll always be pleased to see you.
Well, I hope George will. When I think the day he was born, I was 4.5 hours under chloroform. Oh.
So George and Beryl were married, and it wasn't long before they set about smartening up his act.
If I could beat Bradman or off the 104, I just make a good living, make a good living, make a good living.
To polish up his comedy routines, they approached northern impresario Bert Lohman.
I went down into number 1 room. I said, what do you want to see me about? And he said, well, I'd like to go into pantomime with you. What do you think about it? I said, well, in the first place, I don't think you know anything about pantomime. So he said, no, that's what I want to come to you for, to learn it. So I said to Beryl, all right, but if I'm going to learn George the trade, I want paying for it. I suggest that he pays me £300 over a period of 3 years. She agreed, the contract was signed, and it was a tremendous success. And I think it's first started George Formby in the money class.
Whose records are these? George Formby. George Formby? Never heard of him.
In 1926 he made the first of nearly 200 recordings, and in 1932 he signed up with Decca, where he had his first major hit, Chinese Blues.
Now Mr. Wu, he's got a laundry kind of tricky. He starts me shirts and collars, but he never touched me waistcoat, Mr. Wu. What shall I do? I'm feeling kind of lime of Chinese laundry blue.
The record sold over 100,000 copies.
I'm rich. I'm rich. I'm rich. I'm rich. I'm rich. I'm rich, Mr. Drayton. Mr. Drayton, I'm rich.
But his biggest break came in 1934 when he starred in his first film.
George Formby was already an established musical star when he was signed up by John E. Blakely of Mancunian Films. Mancunian Films was the only filmmaking organisation outside the southeast of England in the 30s and 40s, and it specialised in making films of music hall stars and their routines.
Now if women like them, like men like those, why don't women like me? Take Lord Nelson with one limb, Lady William Hamilton, she fell for him. With one eye and one arm gone west, she ran like the devil and she grabbed the rest. So if women like them, like men like those, why don't women like me? Hey, hey, why don't women like me?
They're a marvellous photographic record of a music hall persona. And a music hall tradition. And indeed, George appears as the John Willie character, the character he inherited from his father.
I love you all day through.
The ever-present Beryl was given a supporting role in the film. Despite her sweet appearance, she was developing a ruthless streak.
When I was 11 years of age, I did a repertory, I was in a repertory company, a little season of it. And during that time, George and Beryl Formby came to see me there. I think they must have been doing a bit of talent spotting or something. And they booked me for this film, Boots, Boots. And the day came when I had to do this shot, and we did a rehearsal of this song and this lovely dance. And we heard someone come in the door. And we had this booming voice say, "Oh, yes, either that kid goes or I do." And I thought, oh, what is it? It was Beryl. Anyway, they said, "Well, I'm sorry, you'll just have to go." And of course, we went back to Manchester, and I cried all the way because I was so upset. I thought it was dreadful.
Although Betty Driver's name still appears on the credits, her place in the film was taken by Beryl.
Well, at the end of 14 days, we'd finished the picture, and it cost the large sum of £3,000. Well, then came the time to sell it. Nobody wanted to buy it. But it did get a world premiere in a place called Burslem. It did, you know, and I'll never forget, because I went up there and it strange as it may seem, it packed him out.
His second film had a more topical theme for the 1930s.
Well, I've got some bad news for you.
Nay, they haven't found me a job, have they?
No.
You give me a fright then, lad.
They've stopped your dough. In other words, you're off the dough.
As far as I can
The audience found Formby's music and personality a welcome relief from the Depression.
me with my little ukulele in my hand. Of course the people do not understand. Some say, why don't you be a scout, why don't you read a book? But I get much more pleasure when I'm playing on me ukulele.
Off the Dole only cost £8,000 but netted £30,000, so Basil Dean invited Formby to join Ealing Studios to work alongside Gracie Fields.
And so he took in these two stars and deliberately set out to create Lancashire comedies around them. And for that purpose, he hired two of the leading northern writers of the day, J.B. Priestley to write for Gracie Fields and Walter Greenwood, the author of Love on the Dole, to write for George Formby.
I signed a 7-year contract, and that was the start of me making 22 films.
I feel like a millionaire, I'm all deluxe and how. I'm in the money, tasting the honey, hitting the high spots now. All my frowns have turned to smiles, no wrinkles on my brow. I'm stepping out more, getting about more, hitting the high spots now. Life is what you make it, so make it worthwhile. Whatever comes, just take it, you gotta swing along and get in rhythm. I'm on top of all the world, I'm making good on how. Turning the switch on, putting the Ritz on, hitting the high spots now.
They all fitted a particular formula. At the centre was George, the gormless, accident-prone, naive, good-natured Lancashire lad. He's put through a succession of humiliations.
I've come back.
So I see.
I found this pencil this morning. It's yours. I was bringing it back. Of course, if you're still short of an overlooker...
We're not.
Well, perhaps you need some machinists.
We do not.
Oh. Well, any hands of any description?
Of no description.
Well, I better be going.
Yes, I think you'd better.
Of course, I just called in, you
Well,
know.
you've called in. Good morning.
Good morning.
There's always the courtship of a brisk upper-class girl whom he ends up with and who seems for some reason to like it.
I'd rather play oughts and crosses with you than take you to a French non-stop review. It may not be so funny, but still it saves me money. I'd rather play oughts and crosses with you.
There's always the defeating of a snooty, often upper-class rival.
That's what you think.
And there's often the rounding up of crooks. George Formby became an almost immediate star. From 1938 to 1943 inclusive, he was the top male British box office star in this country. It's extraordinary to think that he was more popular than Gary Cooper, Errol Flynn, James Cagney. He wrote a Sunday newspaper column, his records were bestsellers, he appeared on the radio. He was an enormously successful film star.
While you're playing your part, keep a song in your heart. Oh, dash it. Count your blessings and smile.
He embodied qualities that people admired and found reassuring in the Depression. He had a good humour, a good nature, a good will, which people found attractive. And you thought that here's a man who, whatever's thrown at him, will come through and he'll come out smiling, and people wanted that.
Smile, come on, smile!
But along with the stardom came stories of his wife's increasingly dominating behaviour. Googie Withers was on the receiving end when she co-starred in Trouble Brewing.
At Ealing Studios there's a canteen, but then there's a sort of an inner sanctum that the stars and the directors used to eat. And I went in there because I was allowed to, you know, I was playing the starring girl's part. And of course I saw Beryl and George sitting at quite a big table, so I thought I'd join them. And there was this ghastly silence. And she looked at me and her eyes opened very wide. She said, "This table is reserved." I said, "Oh, I'm dreadfully sorry." And I went, I mean, the place was empty, and I thought at least we'd sort of have a get-together, because it was the first morning. But no, not at all. Funny woman. I don't know why she was like that.
She did not care what people thought about her. She told me once, she said, "I don't care what they say about me, as long as they think well about George, for him to be popular." And I'd say, and she'd say to Georgie, "Don't cross anybody, refer them to me." And she said, I'll tell them off.
It came over that Beryl was quite a dragon. She was absolutely the opposite, I can assure you. She was a very lovable person.
Yeah, do you know Mr. Wood's a window cleaner now?
I don't care if he's a vacuum cleaner. All I want to know is, can you play the uke?
Yes, yes, you listen.
The actor Gary Marsh worked with Formby on many of his films.
And one day I said to George, "Now, George, let's go up to the Cafe Royal after work." And I said, "We'll have a few drinks and a bit of grub. What about it?" And he said, "I'd love it." I said, "Fine." And suddenly I noticed that his face had dropped. And I said, "What's the matter?" He said, no. Beryl, he said, she'd never wear it. He said, "Besides, I can't afford it." I said, "What do you mean you can't afford it?" I said, £30,000 you get a picture. I said, "Of course you can afford it." He said, "No." He said, "I only get £5 bob a day pocket money from Beryl."
It was his own invention. That all he had was, "Oh, the old woman's only giving me £5 bob." He could go out and buy a car any time he wanted. There was no problem ever, really. But I think probably he was afraid that somebody might want his money.
He was mean, though. He was very tight-fisted. And so that way he would not be unpopular, you know. He'd say, I can't, I'm sorry, love, but I haven't got it, you know. Beryl only gives me 5 bob.
And I said, Beryl, I'd like to take George out tonight, give him a few drinks. What about it? I said, it'll do him good. He's been working very hard. And I said, it'll take his mind off things. And she said, no, he's coming home with me, aren't you, George? And that was that.
And he would be tired, you know, and he would not want to go to parties after a show. So she'd say, well, I'll tell you what, when we go to this party, you give me a signal. And when I get that signal, I'll know what to do. So he'd give her a sign, and she'd say, oh, come on, George, we have to go now. And then they'd hate it. They'd say, that horrible woman, she's dragging him away. And we were all having so much fun.
By this time, George and Beryl were having fun themselves, enjoying the considerable rewards of their success.
Now I'm a young inventor, a chap with good ideas. I built myself a camera, it took me years and years. It's a wonderful invention with special X-ray tricks. It can take a picture in the dark and can even see through bricks. I bought myself an album and filled it up with snaps, and I've got some lovely photos of the local girls and chaps. Now I've got a picture of the girl next door in my little snapshot album. I've never had a better snap before in my little snapshot album. There's Uncle Dick without a care, discarding all his underwear, but his watch and chain still dangles there in my little snapshot album.
The real secret of his success was personality. That wide grin of his seemed to spread right across the screen. George never acted gormless like some successful comedians. He was gormless so far as the audience was concerned.
Look, I'm all wet.
I know you are. It's not really fair for people to think that he was like that he was gormless and stupid and silly, because he really wasn't. I never thought he was terribly funny. I thought he was more of an entertainer than a comedian myself. He was very serious off the stage, and I thought that because he did what he did, proved that he was a better actor. I mean, he gave the impression that he was a real gormless chap, you know, a real happy-go-lucky and ha-ha-ha-ha, you know. But he wasn't like that off the stage at all.
Well, I'm going to be your big daft uncle.
I don't think you're daft.
Don't you?
He knew what he was doing. He had his head screwed on right. I think where it all comes out was the other people didn't know what they were doing, and he did. That's because they thought he was a bit of a gump, and he thought, well, that's great, let them think it.
So Formby himself is partly to blame for this gormless reputation.
Why aren't you selling those drinks? That's enough out of you. Get busy.
He'd often use it to his advantage in private life.
If he didn't want to do anything, he would immediately turn a little bit Lancashire gump, and that would be it.
I've got the eyes of an auk, the strength of a fox, the speed of a hare, and the brains of an ox. Hey, I've got that wrong somewhere.
Gormless or not, Formby's act had an immediate appeal, particularly for child co-star Binky Stewart.
When Uncle George played, it was so simple and it appealed to me. And when I was playing a scene with him playing his ukulele and singing, I was totally enchanted, and that wasn't acting, that was me really lapping it up.
All are in on the swing boats. When you ladies go, mind the crowds below. Take good care what you show. Hold tight. Keep your seats, please.
With the outbreak of war in 1939, Formby was to become a national hero.
Turned out nice again, hasn't it?
Okay, George, stand by. Are you ready, everybody?
Ready?
Formby's first wartime film was a huge box office success, and Mass Observation reported that the sequence where he drops into a Nuremberg rally to attack Hitler was the biggest morale booster of the war.
Hey, you! Hey, Winback! Adolf! What is shocking it? Well, you've asked for it.
Hang up.
Look out, Adolf! I'm coming after you!
I'm determined on self-determination. I wipe the British Empire from the face of the earth.
I want you.
Why?
You're my last territorial demand in Europe.
British Schweinehund, for that I knock your head off on the block.
Not if I knock you a block off first.
It wasn't only through his feature films that Formby kept up morale on the home front.
We have George Formby, so typical of this country, and Geraldo and his orchestra. And you will hear London below ground making a night of it.
Oh, it's turned out nice again. Go on, Eric. Now beholding me, an LDV, for battle I'm just yearning, doing my best like all the rest, to keep the home fires burning, each evening stiff and starch, up and down the street I march, I'm guarding the home of the Home Guard, guarding the Home Guard home.
Cathay Gazette is glad to help George Formby, the famous comedian, in a great effort for relief of distress in blitzed areas.
And I think that the people who haven't been blitzed should help the people who have been blitzed. And if anybody cares to send a contribution, they can send it to George Formby, care of the BBC. Now, please do your best and help. Thank you.
That's the question for the troops at one of the NAFI concerts. And it's put to them in his new song by George Formby.
Now, I say to you, have you ever heard this one, have you? And I want you to shout back which one. It's quite simple. Have you ever heard this one, have you? This one, have you ever heard this one, have you? This one, a crowd outside the baker's in town. Watched the window, it made me frown, 'cause the tart there was upside down. You've never heard that one, have you? Have you ever heard this one, have you? This one, have you ever heard this one, have you? This one, if I was a pigeon I wouldn't hop, I'd fly over Hitler and ribbon drop, and it wouldn't be leaflets that I'd drop.
Well, some very good friends of mine, all of them very well known to you, are going out to speak to the wives, the mothers, and the children of the men serving with our armed forces overseas. Over to George Formby.
Why, it's George Formby.
That's right.
How are all the boys over there?
Oh, they're grand. You don't have to worry about them. They're all right, aren't you, lads? Oh, by the way, lads, I'd like to introduce you to Mrs. McGinty of Manchester. Say hello to the lads.
Where are they?
Through that little hole.
How do you? All right.
And you've got a big family, haven't you?
Well, I've 12 living out of 15. 9 sons and 3 daughters.
In the forces?
No, 8 in the forces, and another boy got his papers waiting to be called up. 3 girls on the munitions.
They've an idea that we don't get much to eat, you know, that we're half-starved.
We don't look so bad on it, do we?
No. So you see, lads, you've nothing to worry about. All the folks at home get as much as they need. Cheerio, lads, and good luck to you.
Goodbye and God bless you, and may you all come back soon and safe.
But it was at the battlefront that George Formby was most appreciated. He was the first Ensa entertainer into France, even before Dunkirk, and earned the OBE and the Order of Lenin for his efforts.
I remember one morning finding him singing to a group of chaps in a halted convoy from the steps of a Normandy farmyard.
Now imagine me in the Maginot Line, sitting on the mine in the Maginot Line. Now it's turned out nice again, now my life is fine. Hitler can't kid us a lot, his secret weapons Tommy rot. You ought to see what the sergeant's got down on the Maginot Line.
Well, we were within 4 miles of Caen, and we were still in the Normandy bridgehead, so we were getting shelled literally every day, but not all day, of course. We arrived in this field, and there was this army lorry there with the tailboard down, and George Formby was on the tailboard, and he said, how far are we from the front line? So somebody said, you're in it. He said, oh, mother! But it certainly cheered us up, and he was the first artist, actually, who we saw in the Normandy bridgehead.
I'll climb this blinking ladder till I get right to the top. Pyjamas lying side by side, ladies' nighties I have spied. I've often seen what goes inside. Well, I'll leave it window.
So now you're going to see George as he really is. George with his ukulele.
Formby had just given a huge concert in India when he was told that the soldiers on guard duty were upset they hadn't been able to see the show.
And George insisted they be collected, and in about 10 minutes there was another 20 or 30 people around, and he thereupon gave an impromptu show just without any trappings at all. He really gave an enormous amount of pleasure to those few, and what he did, the memory will have lived through that camp afterwards for a long time.
Save me, I know. I said, well, if you're drowning, do you mind letting go of me little stick of rock?
And when we went into the show, there were 2 rows of seats in front empty, marked reserved, and he just walked onto the stage and so I wanted to know what the empty seats were for. And told him they were for the officers. He said, there are no officers in my show. He said, move down.
So he said, before we start, I'd like to see all you officers at the back and all the private soldiers and other ranks up at the front. They thought it was a joke that George was making, but he was indignant. He said, there'll be no show here unless you get to the back.
And my new Sunday shirt has got a perforated rudder, Mr. Woo. What shall I do? I'm feeling kind of Limehouse Chinese laundry blue.
And he played us a few tunes to all 45 of us, which really was quite a sentimental moment, because for one short spell the war was forgotten and fellas' thoughts went back to Lancashire, where most of them came from. 1 or 2 of the lads really felt it, and you could see that in their faces.
George Formby played to over 3 million Allied troops in 16 countries, and Beryl was never far from his side.
Wherever George had to go, Beryl had to go too. I just used to say all the time, if you want George, you've got to have me. And they always wanted George, so they had to put up with me.
She did what a lot of wives wouldn't have done. It's just like Montgomery said, if you want to risk your silly neck, you go ahead. She wouldn't have let him move. She said if anything happened to him and he went, I might just as well go with him, because she didn't want to live without him.
Back in Britain, George and Beryl were often sent for by Queen Mary to perform for the royal family.
During the time George was singing his songs, the princesses were singing them with him. And afterwards I said to the king, I said, I notice your daughters know George's songs much better than even I do. And the king said, well, so they should. They buy every record he ever made, and they're on all day long.
When the war ended, George Formby celebrated the troops' homecoming in what was to be his last film.
We've been a long time, a terrible hell of a long time gone. It was the wrong time to leave the little wife, to leave the little sweetheart at the right time of her life. And when she meets you and greets you with a hello darling, now we'll carry on. I'm going to love you more and more than ever I did before. You've been a terrible hell of a long time gone.
When the troops came home, it seemed everyone wanted to forget the war. A new wave of glamorous film stars brought a change, and Formby, finding himself on the sidelines, announced his retirement. But in 1951, he was persuaded to star in his first West End musical.
He'd been known throughout the country on radio and in all the music halls throughout the British Isles, but he'd never appeared in London, in a London run. His only London appearance, I think, was in the London Palladium.
Ordinary people like you and me, happy and contented as we can be. We can walk on air on our ordinary feet, strolling hand in hand along an ordinary street.
Formby was convinced he would be a major flop.
Millions of people sitting on the seats all the time, standing in the aisles. At first they were slightly provincial perhaps, but it became the fashion, and George Formby in Zip Goes a Million was the rage of London.
What extraordinary things we'll do.
But Formby's success was cut short by a severe heart attack, which forced him into semi-retirement at home in Blackpool. For the next few years he did panto, Commonwealth tours and celebrity appearances.
Yes, it's a delicate job judging a bathing beauty contest, especially when it's the grand final staged at Morecambe.
Well, I'll tell you what we'll do, Harry, if the boys will help me.
Oh, sure.
I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll sing.
By the late 50s, he was feeling fit enough to try and update his act.
And we'll prove that it's in the same tempo as the modern rock and roll.
Let's do it, yes.
And the best of luck.
George Formby's last TV appearance was in 1960, by which time Beryl was very ill with leukemia. She had to watch from her bed in Berrildine, their home near Blackpool.
I mean, what do? We don't do anything. We don't become stars. You people make us stars. We wouldn't be any good without you. And any of our present stars today, if they ever believe anything different, they're crazy. I shall always be grateful to the public for what they've done for me.
The day after the show, a journalist phoned Berrildine expecting to speak to George or to Beryl.
Instead, what I thought was a child's voice answered, a little voice, and it's, hello, I said, and I thought it was somebody joking. And I said, who is that? May I speak to Mrs. Formby? And this voice said, I am Mrs. Formby. And I said, what's the matter? She said, you won't keep me long, love, will you? I'm very, very ill. I said, oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Formby. I said, is Mr. Formby there? She said, no. I said, do you know where he is? She said, I don't know and I don't care.
Beryl had turned to drink to cope with her illness, and she and George were drifting apart. When she died, 2 weeks later on Christmas Day 1960, George was away doing pantomime.
I think he really was lost when she went. Absolutely lost. He didn't know what to do.
The press had a field day when Formby announced his engagement to Pat Housen, a young schoolteacher, less than 2 months after Beryl's death.
Well, it's just one of those things. Probably a lot of people think it's a bit quick, but I'll be perfectly honest. I've got to have somebody to look after me. I mean, with what I've got, you've got something on your plate, you know.
So have you don't know it.
So I've got to take things
it's taken 10 years off him.
I've got to take things very quietly at the moment. Yeah. I think we're like a couple of kids the first 2 days, you know. Neither knew which way to look or talk. But if we'd have kept it quiet and gone on secretly, it wouldn't have been nice, no.
This was obviously, to me, a man lost in the wilderness. He was just lost, and I suppose he ran to any direction, and she happened to be there. But I'm very glad indeed that he never married her.
George Formby died just 3 weeks after announcing his engagement, and he was buried beside his father in Warrington. The undertaker for the funeral was Eddie Latter, who'd written many of his songs. His family was stunned when they learned he'd left nearly everything to Pat Howson.
I don't think he really wanted to do that. He never gave me the impression that he didn't care enough about us to take care of us in that way.
It's pretty certain that Beryl Dean had the dimensions of Fort Knox, and that there was quite a lot of cash kicking about. And I had it on good authority that a number of people made a beeline for the house within hours of George dying. There was talk of a suitcase under his bed with £60,000 in it, in cash. That suitcase was never found.
Because the will was contested, the contents of Beryl Dean had to be auctioned off.
It was extremely depressing. People milling about, sifting through his stuff, and it really was an invasion of their privacy. People were walking through the house, they were picking up George's underpants and saying, "Oh, look, George's underpants, George's pyjamas." And it was so sad because it was almost like the Marie Celeste. Everything was there as they'd left it, but the two main players were gone.
Well, that's the end of the show, and I do hope you've enjoyed it, because I have. You know, they say confession's good for the soul, don't they? And I've told you a lot of things that nobody's ever heard before. So now I'd just like to say 3 little words. Good night, good luck, and God bless.